Philip, use a mic, please.
How fragile do you think China is at this point of time? You said the big get fragile.
I have no idea yet about China. I mean, I don't know the structure. Sometimes, like France, for example, people think that France was a big nation-state nation. France was completely dominated by small cities for a long time. And for the state to dominate France, it took till Giscard. It took 140 years of effort for the state to become a dominant thing. It was before run. So I don't know much about China. I know, and the example of France is don't be fooled thinking is you have a big top-down state, because it was totally, powerless, all right? So I don't know about China. I have no idea.
You predicted the current situation with the banks. Now, recently in America, the debt has increased maybe fourfold with the bailouts and all the freebies that are being given out. So what is your prediction, even though the debt to GDP ratio of America is not as bad as Europe, but still it affects the whole world? And what do you predict that may follow?
I see. No, actually, I didn't really predict the crisis. I'm more like an engineer. I saw a bridge, and I said, this bridge is built for a 2-ton trucks, and we're going to have 20-ton trucks drive on it. So all you have to do is wait for it to collapse. The same situation holds today with a vicious element. We have debt, which is a mistake made between an adult who turned out to be a fool and a borrower who turned to be another adult who turned also to be a fool. One underestimated his understanding of the other's abilities. The other misunderstood his own representation of the future and the complexity. Why is the state converting private debt into public debt? Because public debt is permanent and you're taxing your children. So America is immoral. I find governments should realize that it's so hard to predict that you should shoot for not a deficit, they shoot for mild deficits, they should shoot for a positive revenue, okay? Just like households, okay? A household, particularly if you don't have a rich father-in-law. And the world now with China, sort of like not doing that great, doesn't have a father-in-law, rich father-in-law. So I don't know who's going to bail out except the printing press. So you're going to have Gutenberg bailing out everyone, all right? So you have here, so the model is as follows. We are facing an environment with a huge amount of debt that's going to break, the economy. Unemployment today is we have like 6 million more people unemployed in the US alone. And then you start having the domino effect. Governments are more reliant on projections today than they were before. So here we have Obama's budget, all right? Obama, by the way, made us spend all this money on stimulus, saying unemployment will be under 8%. What is it today, okay? With cooked numbers, it's 10%, right? So let me tell you what problem we have today. We're relying more on these experts. So what's going to happen? The next mistake is going to be to overprint. That's the only way out for them, which is why I fear hyperinflation. And I also think that the West is, the center of the world is moving away from the West, which, towards Russia, and of course, countries that don't have debt because they're either the culture was too slow and accommodating, right? I mean, take Dubai as an exception. And even a place like Dubai, they say Dubai has a lot of debt. Dubai is borrowing to put impressive buildings, so they can put them on postcards, no? But America is borrowing to eat. You get the idea? So you see the trouble, all right? And Europe as well. Europe, Western Europe, I mean, Ireland is in deep trouble. So we have all that post-Enlightenment, industrial revolution wave has, to me, is starting to fall apart towards a more conservative, robust model of less integration, less globalization, stuff like that. So what will happen next? I think government will make the usual mistake. They're going to overprint. They had no other choice. You're going to have massive deflation, and they may make a mistake because nonlinearity in economic policies. And then the other thing I'd like to warn is I was in Korea about 5 months ago, and I had my first access of rage in public. There was a gentleman from the IMF, number 2 from the IMF, who came and gave us his projections 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay? 15 he went, all right? He gave us numbers, what I think the IMF will happen. I stopped immediately. I interrupted him to ask him, Sir, Mr. Kato, his name was, number 2 of the IMF, and okay, what was his projections for 2008 and 2009 made in 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, all right? If you see that, you just realize that we have the people who got us here. Why? Because we rely, anytime someone produces these fake numbers, we rely on them, okay? So my point is not to stop people from being charlatans. My point is to build robustness to the errors of expert error. You see, that's my whole idea. And robustness has a very simple criteria. I wrote something in the Financial Times. It was the most downloaded article in the Financial Times for the whole year, 2009, even now. It's called 10 Steps for a Black Swan Robust Society. And that one, it starts with debt. It starts with the fact that government should not say, oh, we need to restore confidence. You can't control confidence. You might be robust. So very simple criteria of robustness. And it's once you look at it that way, you realize you could lower 95% of the risks with 2 or 3 simple measures.
My question is, you said about fragility. How fragile is the internet? And what would be an extremistan situation of the internet for us?
That's an excellent question, because I don't think anybody understands the internet. I was on a couple commission. Now I don't waste time. I spend time in my library because I prefer it better used on my library, all right? But at some point I was involved in something. I studied the internet. I realized nobody understands it. You remember there's one day Pakistan blocked YouTube, all right, in Pakistan. Okay, it led to general YouTube falling apart. And then there was also once an attack on a government website in the United States, and they shut down that node. It prevented them from being able to use the New Orleans, you know, the water control, all right? So the internet is way too, you know, you have a lot of fragilities that we don't see from network effects. I mean, supposedly, we have Nikesh will ask him if Google has its own pathways, all right, redundant pathways. They're sort of aware of it. They're not as foolish as people in finance and banking. But overall, do we quite understand the internet? I don't know. And I don't know, for example, let me give you an idea of why the world is more fragile from the internet. I was in Istanbul a year and a half ago, and I walked into my room, and the internet was not working. I called down the desk. They say, we'll connect you to IT. I spoke to a gentleman. He said, oh, you're room 1207. I think, yeah, let me fix it. Yeah, you should be up now. And then he was talking to me as if he were, you know, controlling my new room I was in. And then he had an Indian accent. I told him, are there many Indians in Istanbul? I was puzzled why I would have an Indian IT person in Istanbul. He said, I'm not in Istanbul, all right? So he was here, somewhere here. So you realize the concentration that we don't, which works beautifully, it's more optimal, it's cheaper, everything's great, but you don't have redundant pathways. So the internet is, I don't know this fragility. All I know is that I make sure I print out anything I need to retrieve, okay? Because, all right, because, you know, that's a potential. Yeah, there are 2 things I'm worried about more than finance. The internet, because of connectivity, and the other one is we're physically a lot more fragile. I started getting involved in physical robustness. Like, for example, you know, I'm in Delhi today. If I were in Delhi 100 years ago, I'd be sweating. So we're not exposed to thermal variation, so it makes you more fragile. You're not exposed to strain in your system. This is why you go to the health club. But even the health club is not ecological enough. So the lack is, we're weaker than our ancestors, believe it or not, okay? And so we'll be weaker. And then the other thing that's happening, we're a lot more connected. So what I said is the next super germ, the optimal one would be the one with long incubation period, all right? Doesn't kill its host immediately, will let it spread, will travel on Air France and Air India and perhaps Continental, maybe not British Air because they're not comfortable enough, but the other ones, you know. But so it will travel, and that you see the idea. So there's 2 problems of connectivity we're facing today that will accentuate the next black swan, just like you had the super bestseller, thanks to the internet, called Harry Potter, okay, or there's a book on blackbirds that totally hard to read, that people start buying thanks to the internet, that book, Black Swan, something. Yeah, all right. So because of, you know, connectivity makes things fly like that, all right? The next germ will experience the same fate, with hosts like us a lot weaker, because technology makes us softer. So this is what I'm worried about. Internet but especially that super germ.
I just want to bring whatever you've said and make it a little relevant to India. You know, there's a economist, a famous Indian economist, who made a statement that we are like a passenger on a bicycle which goes past a BMW with a punctured tire, and we look at the driver and laugh at him because we are passing him by, not knowing that as soon as he repairs his puncture, he'll blow by us, you know, at 200 kilometers per hour. So when you talk about this problem in America and all the problems that have been there in history, these are happening at $40,000, $45,000 per capita income. For us, who are at $1,000, we would trade our position and have a banking crisis or many of these crises if we could get there. So is there some lesson
No,
here?
there's something about, okay, let me talk about robustness again. Is India more robust than the United States? Vastly more, okay? Okay, you have people in the United States with high GDP, but addicted to high level of debt, addicted to high level of spending, with an incompetent government. I mean, contradictory. My job as a logician is to detect. You have Geithner the same day tells the banks, you take too much risk, why don't you lend more? And tells the consumers, you know, you should spend more, you have too much debt, all right? I mean, there are a lot of logical inconsistencies. Incidentally, Geithner has 2 mortgages on his house, which means also inability to forecast variations in real estate prices. His house being 100 yards from mine, I almost bought it when it was on the market, but I said, no, I want to make him sweat, all right? So, no, it's smaller than mine. This is why I didn't buy it. But I said, okay, it's nice to go put my books or something, just as a symbolic gesture. Anyway, so I'm saying that you have you have countries with a high level of GDP that are very fragile. Let me give you another example of why the United States is fragile, okay? A lot more fragile than, say, Soviet Union. Why London is a lot more fragile than India, okay? I went through civil war in Lebanon, okay? When you go through civil war in Lebanon, you become obsessed with what happens when you have total breakdown of social order. And we had that. So I found a gentleman who knows the subject a lot more than me, Dmitry Orlov, who studied the breakdown of social order in the Soviet Union. And he said there was no breakdown of order. Why? They were not efficient. Agriculture in Russia or in the Soviet Union was inefficient. Stalin tried to make it efficient, and he couldn't. He had to kill all the farmers, right? And he couldn't even make it efficient, okay? So you could not have, like in America, one center that makes all the oranges, one center that has the wheat, one place that has the apples, all right? Or 2 places that have the apples. So every city had around it enough agriculture to be self-sufficient. You have the same. All right. So in America, for every calorie you consume, you have 9 calories of energy, of transportation. In Russia, it's less than 1 calorie for every calorie consumed. Okay. And now this makes it very inefficient, but makes it very robust during the crisis. And also, lack of social mobility means you live in an apartment building with people who've known each other for 2 or 3 generations. So there's a built-up of trust. Okay. You have that, people living in their provinces, except in a couple of big cities like Mumbai and Bangalore. Okay, yeah. So you have, in America, most people live in suburbs, very fuel inefficient, and most of the friends are on Facebook. So you realize you don't have, I mean, there are a lot of other elements that would prevent, that makes it a lot more fragile than the West, you see. And plus, with people in the West have so much debt. So GDP is meaningless, okay? You want an indicator of robustness. Okay, all these governments, they shot for GDP. It's meaningless, totally meaningless, absolutely meaningless. It doesn't even reflect standards of living. You can have 3 times the GDP and live worse off. I mean, in Amun, they have a low GDP and they live vastly better than in America. All right, Amun is my village in Lebanon where I'm progressively residing, you see. You get that. So, to answer your question, there's another element, the curse that comes with high GDP, is that people can contract spending now, without they can contract spending a lot, all right, without lowering the standards of living, but hurting the standard of living of someone else by having fewer other people employed. So in other words, you don't need to buy a new car or you don't need to buy a new flat screen TV, but by not buying that, you can contract this expenditure. You're hurting yourself indirectly. You have feedback loops because you're not going to buy a flat screen TV made in China, so the Chinese won't buy the treasury bonds. You see the idea. So this is why I think we're trapped now with the highest unemployment we're going to see, and it's going to keep going.